6, Section 1. And the big idea is, of course, the legislative branch of government. We're going to unpack this a little bit and think about what it does in making laws, how this process works. As you can see by the number of terms today, it's a little complicated, so please bear with me. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Now, the first question is, do you think that representation in both houses of Congress should be based on population? Remember that when we got into the framing of the Constitution, the big compromise was that the Senate would be one state, two votes, and the House would be based on representation. And that was meant to give a balance of power between the number of states and the representation of the people in the states. Because after all, even though it feels like we're one giant state, we're not. We are the United States. And so that does require a little bit of compromise. And so Congress, again, makes the... What does that look like? Well, Congress is a bicameral legislative body. Bicameral means that it has two parts, the House and the Senate. To confuse you further, both are called houses. But there's the House and the Senate, and that's all you need to know for now. So it's bicameral. Each congressperson serves 2-year terms. This means that we had a big giant election in 2016. Everybody knows about that, obviously. But we also have a midterm election coming up this November. And you guys hear about it because I talk about it all the time. And you might see it around on your news feeds, okay. But less will be heard about it because there's not gajillions of dollars being spent on it. There's still money being thrown around, just not to the degree in the big national election. Unfortunately, fewer people will vote in the midterm, and that's life. But it's a big one because this is where your representatives are up for grabs. The big name on the ticket in the Western District where we are is Mark Meadows. He's the one you are likely to have heard of. He's the most famous person on that ticket. He's your United States representative. But there's lots of little people on the ticket too. Cody Brown's up for re-election. He is your state representative. And again, there's numbers of local elections tied into that. You know, some of the Henderson County commissioners are up for re-election. There may be school board members up for re-election, and those are much smaller campaigns. But they're obviously very important because the local stuff is arguably more important than the big stuff because it's more likely to affect you. So each term consists of 2 sessions, meaning that Congress convenes in a session twice during that 2-year period. Okay, so what does the House of Representatives look like? Well, this is based on population. There are 435 congressional positions in the United States House of Representatives. That's a lot, right? 435. Well, these 435 individuals are chosen to represent a population of 300 million people. Even though these 435 people have to represent 300 million people, you'll still get to meet Mark Meadows at some point in your life, if you haven't already. He's been by our school a few times. We'll Skype or meet with him individually if we can. He still has that obligation to meet you. But don't expect him to get to spend a lot of time with you because he has a large district that, he has to work with. So these 435 people, they get moved around because every 10 years, a census is convened, meaning that we've got to figure out how many people are in this country. And that's a process. And guess what? It's a great summer job every 10 years. So in 2020, if you're looking for work in the summer and you like meeting new people and traveling and going to interesting places around Western Carolina, you can be a part of the census. And basically, you hand out surveys. And you tabulate the data. And if they don't, and people hate surveys, right? So if they don't complete them, well, then you have to go to their house. You got to call them. You got to bug them. Eventually, you will find that person, and you're going to get some information about them. That's what the job of a survey worker does. Sounds miserable to me, but anyway, that's what they do.
Wait, so you
So after all the rigmarole of getting that count, you now have, okay, congratulations, there's 11 million people in North Carolina. Okay, 11 million people. Wow, that's different. There's a million more than the last census 10 years prior. They're also living in different places. There's more people in the mountains because congratulations, tourism has attracted people to Henderson County. So that means that we now have more people in Henderson County. The bad news is traffic's a nightmare. Okay, I get that. The good news is we get more representation. And so they have to redraw that line. Okay, how are we going to find the exact number? Because North Carolina gets X amount of representatives based on population, and then they got to figure out who do those representatives serve. And that's a mess too. So those 435 Congress people get divvied up between the states every 10 years. So if we as a state get more people, that's good for us. We get more of these people. If our state shrinks, we get fewer of these people. All right, so the census once more is just that population count. If you want to work for them, good luck. Hopefully they pay well. Now, again, there has to be at least one district per state. There are some tiny states in terms of population. Ironically, Montana is one of the largest states in our country, yet in regards to population, it's one of the smallest. There are fewer than 500,000 people living in Montana. It's one of the reasons I want to go there this summer. I'm really excited about it. Seeing a state with almost no one is somehow appealing to me. After working with people all day, I don't know. But anyway, Montana, as tiny as it is, still gets at least one congressperson. Now, the district size is based on the number of constituents, meaning people. If North Carolina swells in population between one census to the other, in summary, we get more representatives, which is good for us. Gives us more power. And so, yes, gerrymandering, which is the weird process that creates oddly shaped districts. And seriously, look them up, and we will. I'll pull up the map at some point soon. And you'll see that near Charlotte, there is the squiggliest little district. It looks like a curlicue that just goes up the middle of the state. And if you zoom in on the map, you will see that it goes around particular neighborhoods in Charlotte, goes up particular roads, and then hangs a left on a particular road. And that's for a very specific reason.
Because they're bad people.
And that's gerrymandering. Because the law of the land is that the party in power gets to draw that map. And the federal courts are fighting that right now. There's a large-scale grassroots movement to fix that. A lot of people hate that. But it's been on the books for a long time. Now, the Senate, far simpler. Senators serve 6-year terms. Every state has 2. Even Montana, with only 500,000 people, has 2, while California, with 30 million people, has 2. So you get that's odd, right? Senate's not even trying to be one person, one vote. They're not even trying to be representative of population. Their sole purpose is those 2 senators represent the state of Montana. They don't care about how many people are there. Again, 30 million people, 36 million people in California. It's ridiculous. It's like the 6th largest economy in the world. The state of California by itself could be a better country than the United States of America, probably. They're just huge, and I can't emphasize that. They still get 2 senators. So, 2 per state. Now, no more than 1/3 of these senators are up for election at any given time. And that's to prevent the tyranny of the majority. It's tied up with the same reasons as the Electoral College. Our founding fathers were concerned that people would overreact to an issue and swing to one extreme or the other. Because guess what? We as people tend to overreact to an issue and swing from one side of the pendulum to the other. And so there was a safeguard built into the Constitution that we can't just fire everyone in the government at one time. I mean, and wasn't that the whole point of Drain the Swamp? I'm just going to fire everybody and we're going to rebuild the government. I'm going to be a wrecking ball and we'll just break everything and then we'll rebuild it. Well, the Constitution has a safeguard for that. We don't just rebuild governments. Why? Because when we do, what happened when Germany rebuilt their government? What happened when the Arab Spring occurred in 2008, and Libya and Egypt and Syria? Yay, we're going to rebuild our governments.
We're going to kill so many people.
There's been a civil war there ever since. So rebuild it like wrecking ball, drain the swamp. There's safeguards for that. Now again, sometimes it feels like we should be able to fire everyone. I get it. I mean, I get pretty disgruntled myself from time to time. There's an appeal to the theory of drain the swamp, but history has shown that to be a really bad idea. And so we have these safeguards. Okay, so both the House and the Senate have majority and minority parties. In a two-party system, again, there are independents. Bernie Sanders has famously been an independent senator from Vermont for like 90 years. And, he ran on the Democratic Party's ticket, but he's been an independent in Vermont for, again, who knows how long. He's been a member of a minority party. And in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, this is the political party to which fewer than half the members belong. So right now, the House and the Senate are both controlled by the Republican Party. So that's the majority party in both. But the minority party is still significant. Now the majority party, this is the party in which more than half of the members belong. So once more, in terms of the legislature currently, the majority party is Republican. The minority party is Democrat. And whoever controls the House gets to choose the Speaker of the House. Now, the Speaker of the House is not a democratically elected position, though they are chosen from among the legislatures. So technically, that legislature has been elected through the democratic process, but they have been appointed to be Speaker from within their own party. And the Speaker of the House is an important position. They moderate the debates. They can also influence the House business. They're kind of like our student body president. So Ariana can't rule by decree. I mean, she can suggest a policy. She can direct the conversation. And she can really push for an agenda that we'll probably go along with because we're kind of following her lead on this. But at the same time, she has a lot of influence over the direction, though ultimately it's still up to the people in the club to make the decision. And the leader of the Senate, meanwhile, anybody want to guess?
Mike
Mike Pence. He is the President pro tempore. I probably mispronounced that, but President pro tempore of the Senate is Vice President Mike Pence, and he is the Speaker of the Senate, and typically does not vote, though sometimes he'll vote for symbolic reasons. But he has the authority to cast the tie-breaking vote, which is significant. And I think he has already exercised that power once or twice. It's a lengthy one. How do you feel about gerrymandering? Ooh, I'm gonna save that question because, well, guess what? Let's go there. We will go there, I promise. I've got a whole section on it coming up soon. But what's the work of getting a law passed like? And here's the question, when we get the representatives in the room, if you guys don't ask it, I'll ask it. Hey, what's it look like making a law? Tell us how fun that is. And they're going to go, it's really pretty boring. And it is, I mean, if you ever watch C-SPAN, it's like what people put on to fall asleep. The process, well, if you got to go to D.C. with us last year, and a lot of you guys did, and it was awesome, we got to go see the place where laws are made. And I don't know if you noticed me, but I was like, I was geeking about that one. That was cool for me to see where laws are made. I was like, this is where the '64 Civil Rights Act was passed. Like, this is where they took Vietnam away from Nixon. Like, this is it. This is where the big things happen. And what did we see when we went in there? We had to be super quiet. There were like a dozen people in there talking quietly. You guys had to wait forever for the end of the line. I was the end of the line, so you had to wait forever for me to get there. And then y'all were ready to leave when I got there because
How well we waited.
it was
we got yelled at for putting our feet on the seats. It was good.
most of the work done in Congress. Well, it's in committee. That's where they have these little meetings and they handle the bills that are processed and they take them through and eventually make them laws. There's a number of standing committees. These are permanent committees that continue their work from session to session. In SGA, we have standing committees. There's always a prom committee. We'll talk about stuff in session, but if you come to our meetings when we're meeting in session, it's rather chaotic. We're all like, hey, I want to suggest this. I have this idea. I have this idea. And that's great. But in all honesty, that's kind of what Congress in session looks like. Everybody has their ideas. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody needs to make their speech and hear their spiel. I get it. There's a reason for that. But I think something that we've done that's become very effective is we'll have that time at the beginning of the meeting. Everybody talk about what you want to talk about. But then what do?
Kind of regroup and then discuss.
We get in our groups. And that's become a really effective part of our club. When we get in the groups, that's where stuff actually gets done. I mean, really. And honestly, like any political scientist will tell you that the real work in Congress happens in those groups. Committees, you got your agriculture, you got your budget, you got your veterans affairs. Those are just a couple to keep it simple. We also have temporary as needs arise. For example, like say there's a special issue. One of the things about the Trump administration that I'm really excited about is this new emphasis on the opioid crisis. And I think there's a lot of awareness being brought to this national problem that people are struggling with in our community and around the country. And so by appointing a temporary committee to investigate the issue, by calling this a national health crisis, that actually opens up federal funds for new programs and treatment and so forth. And so occasionally there are joint committees, meaning that members of the House and the Senate meet together. Let's say if it's something extremely important that both groups need to work together on, come up with a compromise simply because it just needs to pass. Like, let's say when Pearl Harbor happened, we've been attacked by the Japanese. We need a quick decision. What's going to be done about this? And so an emergency session was called of Congress. and there was probably a temporary joint committee between the House and the Congress. They're like, we've been attacked. This war's going to happen. Any objections? I think one guy voted against it, and they were like, shut up, guy. This war's going to happen. And yeah. And so I would imagine there was an emergency, temporary, joint committee for that case. Okay. These committee assignments are based on seniority. Oh, yeah, that happens in the legislature, too. Seniority simply is the years of service. The longer you've been there, the better committees you get. You know, when you guys meet Cody Brown, he's still new to the game. When the school safety thing came up, he was assigned that committee. So he is in charge of the school safety stuff. So he'll have lots to tell you about school safety stuff. But he really didn't get his pick. I mean, that's just kind of what he was told to do. Because after all, he's a young representative. Now, say he's been in the game, like he's been up for re-election a million times and he's been in the game 20 years, he'll have his pick of what committees he really wants. Maybe, and that's when after he's paid his dues, he'll get to work on his passion project, which who knows what it is, but, you know, and he'll finally have earned the right. Now, members of Congress with the longest service tend to be given the most favored assignments. These are the ones that they've put in their time. They've worked for years. They've dealt with the drudgery and complexity of the system. And all they ever really wanted to do was fix this thing. And by that time, they have no hair left or it's gray. All their teeth have fallen out. All they've ever wanted to do is this thing. And they were that determined and patient to wait that amount of time to do that thing. And now they get to do the thing. Yay. Okay, so authority has its purpose. It's not always, again, it's controversial as well. Because what if you do want to drain the swamp? Well, draining the swamp is complicated because it just is. You know, if you're wanting a law passed, well, it's got to go through that committee. Well, that committee has the oldest people in Congress sitting on it. And that doesn't mean, you know, so that means one election is unlikely to sway the old people sitting on that committee because their seats are rather safe. All right, we'll get to